Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lindsay Zilli, and I'm the Director of Professional Learning for Illinois Digital Educators Alliance. I'm so glad that you've carved out some time today to spend with us. We've got a very exciting topic for you for today's Wednesday webinar. Just some logistics, please utilize that chat whenever you have a question or a comment. And at the very end of today's session, I will drop a link for your professional development hour. I'll also hang out via email with you if you need any kind of assistance with your PDH. So I'll give you my email in the chat as well and make sure you get what you needed. So without further ado, I'm going to toss it over to Todd. Thank you so much for being here today, Todd.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. And yeah, we're absolutely delighted to be here. And hello to all of the IDEA members on the call. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for this exclusive webinar for you. So today, our goal is to unpack some of the key insights that are found in the latest Future of Education report from us here at Future Design School, all of which will have profound impacts on schools throughout Illinois and across North America and around the world in the months and years to come. So as Lindsay mentioned, my name is Todd Harrison. I'm an education lead here at Future Design School, and I also serve as the editor and a trends analyst for our Future of Education report. So it's my job to capture all of our action research from the field and then create those actionable case studies that we know school leaders value so much. Before we dig into the report, a quick bit about us for anyone who hasn't had a chance to work with us. Future Design School is a leading education advisory firm, and we support deep competency development and skill mastery through exceptional learning experiences. We provide transformational strategy and professional development, as well as a wide range of robust tools and frameworks and resources. We support over 50,000 education innovators worldwide, and that includes heads of K-12 independent schools and district leaders and superintendents and principals, university chancellors and provosts, and a wide array of teachers and school administrators. And we also build education strategy for some of the world's top companies like Google and Apple. Our Future of Education report is an annual publication that features insights and ideas on the shape of school to come. It leverages in-depth case studies as well as best practices and actionable methodologies. And the report is packed full of practical considerations for how to scaffold new pedagogies in schools. And our team, of course, is available to provide all the support that leaders and teachers need. And in terms of today's webinar, we will be exploring some strategies that are being used by schools and districts to embed skill development and measurement at all levels of learning. We'll look specifically at how to cultivate a portrait of a graduate and build personalized inquiry experiences. And of course, since conversations about personalization, we know so often fall short when it comes to assessment, we will make sure to discuss that part in detail by unpacking our assessment model, which we call journey-based assessment. And finally, we will wrap up the webinar with some Q&A time. So do please make use of the Q&A function here in Zoom, which is down on the bottom if you're on desktop, and then in sort of the middle bottom if you're on mobile, that Q&A button to submit your questions over to us. Alongside this webinar, we have developed a free diagnostic tool to help illustrate your school's unique strengths and needs in this moment as it pertains to all of the topics we'll be discussing. So toward the end of today's webinar, I'll share a link to a survey you can fill out. And when the session is over, if you've completed that diagnostic survey, you'll receive a custom report that is based on your responses, including some customized key considerations for your school. So look for that. But at this point, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to and hand things over to Future Design School's Managing Director, Sandra Nagy, and our CEO, Sarah Prevet. And for those of you who haven't worked with us, I'll let you know Sandra and Sarah have a considerable experience in leading education strategy in schools and districts all around the world. In fact, this past year alone, they've overseen a team working in over 65 different countries. They have an incredibly unique lens on the changes happening in K-12 and in higher ed, and the best practices for effective teaching and learning. They also bring a wealth of experience from industry. They've both led and scaled organizations, developed new products, and built high-performance teams. So welcome, Sarah and Sandra.
Thanks so much, Todd. And thanks everyone for joining. So for those of you who have already read this year's edition of the Future of Education report, you'll know that the big call to action is really this fact that we're facing a significant gap in society. So on one hand, we have employers who say that they can't find the candidates that they need. And on the other hand, we have graduates saying they can't find jobs in their fields. So the skills gap is significant and it's growing, and schools have a really vital role to play in addressing it through the purposeful development and measurement of those in-demand skills and competencies. In addition, we're also seeing more and more schools shifting to provide or try to provide a more personalized learning approach for students of all ages. And we know that that's critical for addressing the needs of future employers, but more importantly, it's really important for students themselves. And as many of you will already know, the world that they're going to be inhabiting is changing pretty quickly. And you probably talked about the gig economy, but freelance work is on the rise. And we have a real onus to prepare students to be self-sufficient, resourceful, and entrepreneurial. And I think valuing skill development and critical competencies as a part of academic achievement really does set the stage for a more equitable and universal learning environment. It also enables us to ensure that more students have the opportunity to align their education to their own personal strengths and build skills that are going to prepare them for maybe jobs that haven't even yet been invented. So I want to start right off with a caveat to say that I don't believe that there's one right way only to develop future ready skills. What we've seen in our work is a wide range of systems and strategies in places around the world. And I think that there's nuggets that we can pull out of that, though. There's successful competency development and measurement programs that share a few common characteristics. And the first one is that students are empowered to really make multiple attempts to demonstrate skills and advance once they have mastered each skill. And to do that, the skills need to be visible, they need to be tied to clear, measurable, authentic learning objectives. So maybe as an example, a community design challenge that activates problem solving and critical thinking skills. And assessment needs to be more than just a letter or a numerical grade, right? It really is about the cycle of feedback and reflection from the student that leads to a truly deeper understanding, right? This is not a check mark exercise. What we're actually trying to do is push students in their thinking forward. And students need to be able to receive that timely, personalized, in the moment support. And also important, skill development is deeply embedded in the knowledge acquisition, right? It's not separate and a standalone. It's actually embedded in everything that we're doing and across, every classroom that the student experiences. So I think it's important to talk about what the top skills are that students need. And so the top skills that are coming forward are probably not surprising. Critical thinking and analysis, problem solving and self-management, that active learning and resilience, stress tolerance and flexibility, right? Being able to be agile and to handle changing and flux in information. And these skills consistently appear at the top of lists of in-demand competencies worldwide. And so we know that at the heart of skill development is students actually really appreciating the why, right? The understanding that they're building industry-informed, future-ready skills, they see the value, and they're gaining real experience in the application of those skills. So through what we would call authentic performance tasks and real-world experience. What I think is super exciting is that this is not something that we're waiting to happen, and I'm sure you see it. It's happening now, and we're witnessing really a major shift in K-12 education, and it's taking hold on these principles. And schools that are slow to embed and really engage their teachers in doing this in a meaningful way are going to have to catch up. And the first step in all of this, and one that we really strongly advocate every school should undertake, is developing a portrait of a graduate. So when done right, a portrait really captures the key industry-informed skills, so separate from the knowledge, skills, and competencies, and the measurable future-ready competencies that students need to consciously pursue really throughout their K-12 journey. And so much of the world of education seems to be shifting and changing, but a skill-based, future-ready portrait of a graduate gives us a really solid foundation. And what I think is really important is it's giving teachers, students, and parents a well-defined shared vision. And it also provides shared language around key aspects and goals. And we know that most schools don't have bandwidth to read all the deep research or build their own competency continuums that have all of the elements of it. And for that reason, we've developed our own portrait that schools are adopting and leveraging immediately. So it might be helpful if Sandra can take a moment and show us our portrait.
Yeah, for sure. So as Sarah mentioned, building a portrait is definitely a significant undertaking. And our own portrait has taken many years to develop. It's also been deeply informed by our work with schools and districts. It is also backed by industry insights, academic research, and pedagogical best practices that have taken place through real action research in classrooms around the world. Before we jump into some actual examples of portraits in action, what I want to do is just take a few minutes to break down the 5 rings. Starting in the center of our portrait, you'll see the wellness ring. And focusing on skills in this area really provides the necessary foundation on which higher order competencies, which are showcased in the other rings, can be built. Ensuring students have pride in their own identity, giving them a space to feel comfortable being who they are, and making sure that there are conditions that empower psychological safety in the classroom and the school community, and also foster in students a sense of optimism as they learn about the future. That's what really sets the base for everything that comes next. The second ring covers social emotional learning. And we know that there are social emotional learning standards that you are beholden to as well in Illinois. And in this ring, what we talk about is building on that wellness ring by embedding the key skills students need to cultivate a greater understanding of themselves and others throughout their learning journey. It also ensures that students develop the tools necessary to help them navigate really complex situations. The third ring is focused on establishing learning skills, ones that empower student agency during goal setting, and includes well-known skills like metacognition, in addition to some skills you're likely not to see on many other portraits. Take constructive doubt as an example. It's an incredibly important attribute we need to cultivate in our students in this age of disinformation. We need students to learn to question all information as it's presented, to never accept something at face value, and to always ask those deeper level questions. Each attribute, like constructive doubt, has a whole developmental continuum that's behind it, that has specific protocols built in, important transferable skills, those look-fors when you think about assessment, and adjacent critical concepts that students need to understand. With something like constructive doubt, some of the critical concepts associated with it are things like understanding justice, ethics, morality, and uncovering content related to systemic oppression. Implementing a portrait takes a lot of work, which is why we've built it in a way that allows your schools to have instant access to leverageable frameworks, protocols, and importantly, assessment guides. We even have ready-to-go experiences for students to explore those critical concepts and flex the specific skills and really reflect on their attribute development in a meaningful way. Moving to the fourth ring, we focus on character development, zeroing in on 5 ubiquitous skills of successful leaders in society. We call it CARES at Future Design School, fostering curiosity, ambition, resourcefulness, empathy, and stewardship. These are all essential components of future success, regardless of what a student's aspirations are. And finally, the purple ring represents the future-ready skills. These 8 attributes, underpinned by the traits in the preceding rings, really encapsulate the transferable skills necessary to navigate our changing world. On the one side, we have the 4 C's that many of you, I'm sure, have been talking about in education for years now, and which still remain vitally important: critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. And then we add in additional skills that are equally important. Students need to be developing a sense of equity and inclusion, a globally oriented vision aligned to the future, an entrepreneurial mindset where they see challenges as opportunities that they have the creative confidence to really roll up their sleeves and solve. And to that end, an understanding of design thinking or human-centered design as a process for deep problem solving is something we add in as well. While we're just really flying over the top layer, it's a really robust portrait. And know that it's deeply linked to knowledge acquisition and curricular goals. And it's mapped when we work with schools to every school's unique context. So would love now to consider a couple of examples of portraits of a graduate in action. Sarah, I'm going to throw it to you to walk us through.
Absolutely. So these are two very different, but I think equally inspiring case studies. So one is from a forward-thinking public school district in Danbury, Connecticut. And another one is actually from a network of independent schools based in Pakistan that serves thousands of students. So Danbury Public Schools in Connecticut, they recently launched a new portrait of a graduate centered on the 5 critical attributes that they determined. So advocates, collaborators, communicators, innovators, learners, and we've been working with them to really identify what are the ideal states for student growth in each of these areas. And we're actually building a progression of measurable skill development really across all of the grade bands. And then from there, we're building a robust professional learning program that's going to support teachers in really implementing the vision with fidelity. So reimagining learning experiences to cultivate skill development purposefully with students. We're also supporting Danbury in the creation of an interactive digital dashboard, which is meant to track student progress and competency development, something we'll come back to shortly. I think, though, the 2 most important aspects to really highlight was the fact that this was done through co-creation. Everyone involved as instructional leaders had a chance to have authentic voice. And there was real engagement with stakeholders. So everyone, even down to employers in the region, were able to give their lens. And that led to a really fulsome plan that's really been met with wide enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the network of foundation independent schools in Pakistan, who work in a system that is very traditional in its approach, focusing primarily on reading, writing, and math, they've adopted our Future Ready skills and competencies as a new way to modernize their classrooms. And feedback has been awesome. They've seen a distinct difference from students in problem-solving abilities. Parents are reporting improved self-confidence as well as engagement, and they're really just at the beginning of what's possible. A critical aspect of adopting our portrait was that we could match culture and unique school environment. And we spend a lot of time learning about every school community. And as schools around the world adopt our portrait, we really try to take the nuance of each community into account. So what I think is really exciting is the move to adopt competency-based report cards. These new report cards highlight for a student where they are in their learning journey and what they need to do in order to progress. So through that meaningful feedback and ongoing reflection and assessment of students' ongoing learning, educators are documenting where the student is succeeding and where there's opportunities for improvement and really encouraging them to continue on their journey towards mastery. And that also enables thoughtful reflection on the educator's part to think about providing guided opportunities for students to build metacognition skills by reflecting deeply on their development of the identified skills. I think this is really important because, as you will all know, grades often result in students playing the game of school instead of really focusing on the learning.
And it really doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's clear that that game of school needs to change. When students are focused on being the best by getting the highest marks or grades or finding only the right answers, there are many missed opportunities, not only for students, but for educators as well. Teachers need to be focused on identifying how to best support and engage their learners in ways that are deep, authentic, and meaningfully connected to the real world. It's really time to shift our approach to understand how our students learn and to leverage that information to search for opportunities to inspire their learning journeys, teaching skills, competencies, and content along the way. And that's really the central premise behind personalized inquiry. It starts with the student, and it engages them to actively participate in the design of their own learning, resulting in educational experiences that truly reflect their needs. Adopting a personalized approach is vital to meeting students where they're at and engaging them and avoiding them falling behind in this changing world. And just as there's no one set of key skills that all students must develop, there's also no one right way to do personalized inquiry. But there are definitely some key aspects and best practices that we can take into consideration. Personalized inquiry should be problem-driven and really focused on students coming up with real community-connected solutions. It provides student choice and voice in what they're learning, and also, really importantly, how they're showcasing it. It's continuous, ongoing, and allows students to think deeper, always asking that next layer of questions. It also includes truly meaningful reflection, which means it shouldn't feel like a chore to students. It should really challenge students to deeply explore what they learned, how they learn on an ongoing basis, not just at the very end of the learning experience. It asks students to set their next goals and identify what they would like to develop. Personalized inquiry is focused on the individual mastery of future-ready skills, and it's supported by ongoing assessment and iteration. And changing assessment practices is critical to the success of this type of implementation. We need to start measuring what matters. Students should be given regular opportunities to learn from their mistakes and identify their own next steps. And we'll dig into that in just a moment. The common thread that unites all of this, though, is authentic engagement in learning, where we're developing programs that activate student passion and helps them chart their own personal course through school. I wanted to give you an example of that at Queen Margaret School in British Columbia, Canada. The 8th and 9th grade program is being completely reimagined to focus on offering personalized, student-centered approaches to learning that align perfectly with the province's competency-based curriculum. It's intended to nurture the developmental and the social-emotional needs of students while empowering them to become independent thinkers, problem solvers, creators, and collaborators. The British Columbia curriculum has allowed for great innovation across multiple schools, and there's lots that we can learn from what's happened in this province. Schools like this one leverage personalized inquiry that's supported in a co-teaching model, consisting of one English and social studies specialist and one science and math specialist that work with the same students. The whole timetable is designed in a project-based learning format, which really allows students to stay in the zone and dig deeply into topics that matter to them. Meanwhile, through a personalized and ongoing approach to assessment, students are developing important skills in the areas of self-awareness, responsible decision-making, problem-solving, and critical thinking, things that probably align with some of the words that you see in your own social-emotional learning curriculum. The teaching teams guide authentic integrated learning that encourages wonder while building the essential skills in literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, and the humanities, using that notion of student reflection and deep data to gain insights that benefit students, teachers, parents, and school leaders alike. Shifting to personalized inquiry, though, falls flat without it also including new approaches to assessment.
Wonderful segue. And that's really the concept of journey-based assessment. It's developed specifically to address this need. So what it does is it places an emphasis on students making those multiple attempts at skill mastery, with teachers providing ongoing personalized feedback as they progress. So in other words, it's less memorization and test proctoring and more about one-on-one coaching around skill development. And it's really about rewarding the process of learning and all the skills we just talked about through ongoing assessment. So at the center of all of this is what we call conscious pursuit. It's really integral that students are conscious of the skills that they're pursuing. How are they consciously pursuing mastery of those specific skills? And how are they consciously working towards going deeper, getting better, and developing the questions that cultivate even a deeper understanding? That metacognition piece is really critical. So how are we cultivating moments for students to understand how they're thinking and then pushing them to think about things from a different perspective? And it really isn't enough to outline key attributes. What we want to stay away from is, portraits and competencies being pretty posters on walls in schools. What we want to make sure is that we're ensuring protocols that enable students to be aware of the skills they're developing, getting them to think about their ongoing progress within that specific skill, and understand its importance in transferability, right? Getting back to that why. Students need to be reflecting meaningfully and taking agency on how to flex their skills differently and in different situations. And skills-based learning needs to start with assessment, as Sandra said. And I think, it's important to say that it doesn't have to be complicated. And often the best way to start is to start simply. So this is an example of a starter log that we've built for journey-based assessment that's being used by multiple schools. What we've heard time and time again from educators is that they need practical frameworks and a chance to build confidence with them over time before they progress in their own development. So personalized inquiry and skill development and measurement, you can't disentangle them. They go hand in hand, and implementing them is best thought of as a journey itself. So these are the three common phases that we've seen as entry points or growth. So in phase one, teachers are really involved in setting the learner goals, helping students chart a course for their skill development, really explicitly explaining the why and the how of learning. Whenever possible, letting students, have some choice in voice. But in that second phase, that's where the deeper metacognitive component of personalization really comes into focus. So students are being pushed to determine the why and the how of what they learn. And they're guided by ongoing feedback and assessment by their teachers. And then finally, in that third phase, the future-ready competency-based model is really visible to students, right? And they're given the opportunity to demonstrate and articulate these competencies really authentically through their own personalized inquiry journeys.
Pulling together this notion of skill measurement and personalized inquiry means being able to track individual student progress over time. We continue to see that when schools do individualized progression well, they perform ongoing assessment throughout the learning journey. They cultivate student agency, and they leverage actionable data and documentation. Let's unpack what all of this looks like through the lens of a student experience. I want to talk about Mila, a high school student looking to attend college in the fall. When Mila started the school year, she engaged in a series of formative assessments as part of the courses that she selected. These were generated and delivered to her through an online platform where she had a choice in how to show her understanding. Each of these assessments were intended to set a benchmark of her level of mastery of the competencies and attributes that the school had identified. Things like collaborative problem solving in teams and data analysis. These areas of focus were developed in partnership with industry experts. They're also mapped on a continuum of development that underpins the technology system and the data being collected, where student growth is tracked over time. And the rationale for tracking is to easily identify the gaps in knowledge and opportunities for growth on an individual student level. Using data gives a school so many options for how to support all learners. Students and teachers have access to that real-time progression, monitoring, and also that engagement level. The monitoring helps educators identify opportunities for students to advance their learning, giving each student a unique pathway to success. One of the other pieces of Mila's experience that's fantastic is the portfolio she's building. She's been documenting her learning right from her first day of school. From her assessments to video, audio, and examples of her work, what she's able to do is share her knowledge and skills in such a deeply meaningful way.
Technology really has made, I think, documentation just so much more available. And I'm sure that there are many people sitting on this call right now who hear the word portfolio and immediately have a visceral reaction. We've seen a lot of portfolio initiatives fail, let's call it out. But I think we need to be careful to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And when done right, portfolios can be really awesome tools. And we're seeing more and more universities consider the portfolios of incoming students. And Also, we've seen universities focusing on creating portfolios for their students that are showcasing to potential employers. So I think it's really interesting how much, technology tools have this huge potential to really change school for the better, really empower us as we're doing more competency development in our schools.
So true, Sarah. And on the subject of digital tools, one that I'm sure is very close to the heart of IDEA members, I want to pause here for a brief moment to share that diagnostic I mentioned off the top for anyone who would like a custom report to their school. So for their school, I mean. So I'll drop a link in the chat now. And I encourage you to take a few minutes to fill out this quick survey. I'll know, of course, the information you provide will be kept totally confidential. No one else will see your school's specific info. So while you reflect on that diagnostics survey, I'll throw back to Sarah to give us some final thoughts to close out the presentation part of the webinar before we open things up for Q&A.
Thank you, Todd. I think my final thoughts are really about the fact that it doesn't matter where you're starting from. Everyone has steps that they can take further towards skill development and measurement in their own school. And so, the big question is, what can you do next? What are some of those actions that you can take? And maybe you have a well-defined portrait and it's just about measuring those skills, or maybe you want to further refine a portrait or adapt one. What we know is that action creates momentum, and building momentum galvanizes other people, right? It's the snowball effect, getting bigger and picking up speed as it rolls downhill. Yes, I see Todd's face and realize what a Canadian analogy that was. They have snow in Illinois. We know everyone has a big, bold vision for education. And what we really want to encourage you is to think about, what is that big, beautiful ideal? And how can you break it down into smaller, quick wins? And think big blue sky, and then think about what are those smaller steps that could be taken today. So maybe there's a small group of really innovative teachers who would be a great team to pilot further skill development and measurement. And what can you do to really push things forward? I really like the word pilot. I think pilots are the best way to start. It's, what is the minimum viable pilot and who would be involved? What are the assumptions that you need to test? And how might we actually test those through real world experiments in the classroom? All with an eye, of course, of taking that learning and then scaling it beyond the initial early adopters. What we know is, if we can be dedicated to quick action and real-time learning and ongoing evolution, and empower our teams to be dedicated to the same, we'll be successful no matter what we set out to do. And we certainly hope that you'll reach out to us if we can be helpful in any way along your journey.
Thanks, Sarah. A great provocation there on taking steps to action, and a great segue to the next slide. So first things first, we're really looking forward to digging into your questions in a moment. Some great ones have already come in. If you haven't submitted your question yet, again, please do so now using that Q&A function here in Zoom. In the meantime, and speaking of what Sarah mentioned about being helpful, I'd like to invite you to book a free consultation with a member of our senior leadership team here. Both Sarah and Sandra are happy to talk one-on-one about your vision for skill development. So if you're a Google Calendar user, you can choose an appointment slot directly via the link provided there. Alternatively, feel free to drop Sandra a line and she'll follow up promptly, of course. Also, if you haven't done so already, we'd all love for you to access your free copy of the Future of Education Report 2022. You can go to the link there you see on screen. Note that it is case sensitive if you're typing it, or just click the link I dropped into the chat to fill out the quick form and then receive a download link for the report. So we'll stop sharing slides here, and I'll start pulling up those questions that you've submitted so far for Sarah and Sandra to answer. So some great ones here. Here's a good place to start, I guess, and I'll get you to answer this one, Sandra, is how do I get started? Can you give some concrete examples of how people get started?
Absolutely. I think we all know that teachers are on a spectrum when it comes to change and education transformation. So the first thing I like to say to school leaders is start where they are. And really move forward from there. And we were talking about this with Lindsay before. Incremental change is change, right? You want to get, to Sarah's point, that snowball moving down the hill. But what I would do is really think about, who's your coalition of the willing? Who are the people that can be your lighthouse in a school district that will take something on and be then the showcase for others? And it's really, really critical. I would also say that when you're starting with that coalition of the willing, start small. What's a mini challenge that they might be able to bring into their classroom? So Sarah talked about Danbury and the professional development that we've been doing with them. And we're just wrapping up this school year with our small experimentation group that's trying out the attributes in their classrooms. And we said to them, let's start building a mini challenge, 1 to 3 lessons, something that you can do with students. And then let's actually reflect back on what worked, what didn't work, what would we be doing differently the next time. Then what we're moving towards is what would a unit look like? So if we took one unit and really did some transformative work where we were embedding the skills into the unit, what might that look like before you move to a full year? And then ideally before you move to a model like the one in BC where they're working in an interdisciplinary way. So start somewhere and kind of scale up from there and start with the people that are not going to be your negative people out of the gate. You can bring those other people along, but really start to show some momentum in your district or your school. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks a lot, Sandra. Yeah, I definitely leaning into those opportunities is absolutely vital. But that brings us to our next question that I think is an important sentiment. Sarah, I wonder if you might address. Somebody simply wrote, "This is great, but everyone's burnt out." What do we say in that situation to those folks? Sorry to give you the.
No, but it's legitimate. Everybody is burnt out. What did the New York Times call it? Languishing. Everyone is languishing. It is a real moment, right? And I think we have to confront the reality that's presented to us. I think there's a change in conversation that I've noticed from the pandemic to this moment. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the conversations we were having with school leaders was about how do we put in mechanisms for wellness and how do we really focus on wellness? And a lot of those initiatives have been put into place. Now the conversation that we're having is how do I push people to get back to hustling and pushing and, reignite the spark? And to me, there's nothing that galvanizes people more than giving them something that's inherently optimistic to do, like innovation, right? Innovation itself is inherently optimistic. And so I think this is the perfect moment to engage people and remind them why they got into education in the first place, which undoubtedly was because they were passionate about making a difference and having an impact. And what greater impact could you have than being part of this revolution that's changing education to be subject-based to competency-based? Like it's amazing. And it's really a privilege that we all get to be a part of it right from the get-go.
That's true.
I don't know if I answered it, but I talked a lot. Does that count?
I mean, despite my well-known for you two love of spreadsheets, I definitely didn't become a teacher just to put marks into a grade book, right? There was a lot more to it than that. So that's such a good point, Sarah. So thank you for that. Sandra, when you were talking about the portrait, a question came in about the portrait. So someone said, you talked about people adopting your portrait. How does that work? So perhaps you could speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say the first thing is get in touch. What I would love to hear is what are you interested in? What sparked your curiosity about the portrait? And I'd love to learn about the nuance of whoever sent in that question, what your particular school or district might be looking for. So the best way is to get in touch. We'll have a conversation, and it's a fulsome implementation where we work with you to really understand your school and then think about deep, sustained professional development. And sort of as I was describing with the Danbury, though they're using their own portrait, it's about starting small and kind of growing that out in a cohort-based model inside of a school. But the best thing to do is honestly drop me an email. Happy to chat. And really, we've got frameworks, tools, approaches, assessment practices, the whole systematic approach to bringing this into your school, and we can talk through it based on your starting point.
Thanks a lot, Sandra.
No problem.
A couple more questions. Sarah, here's another easy one for you. We tried personalized learning at my previous school, but teachers found it to be too much work. That's something we've heard.
You got all the good ones.
Yeah.
Thanks, Todd. Really appreciate all the softballs. I get you. When everyone has initiatives and things that have fallen flat, I think that's a really great starting point actually for a consultation, understanding why. So if you were trying to introduce a concept, let's go back and ask, where it fell down, where were the barriers? And I'll tell you from experience in all of these schools, I think that the most common barrier that I hear or see is that there's visionary leadership. There's typically somebody who has like a great vision. This is what we should do. And they're absolutely right. But typically where it falls short is they paint a picture of the what, but they don't support the how to the point where people feel scaffolded and confident. And as educators, everyone will know that there's lots of fads in education, right? And so it's hard for people to distinguish, is this just something that, this too shall pass, or is this something that's sticking? And so, personalized learning is not going anywhere. That is the goal. Like that, full stop. We need to be pushing towards that. So I think it's really about how do you re-engage and how can you listen? And I think that, the most successful implementations of personalized learning I've seen have involved teacher voice, where teachers have a seat at the table in the co-creation of the initiative and supporting how it's rolled out. Because oftentimes, educators know the answer, they know what they need, they're just not being asked explicitly. So, I would start with, how do we bring everybody to the table, get feedback on what didn't work, be transparent that it didn't work, and then help, build shared vision together for the future.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Though by no means a simple process, which I guess leads us to this last question there, Sandra, which came in, which was how can Future Design School help with all of this stuff? Perhaps you could speak a bit to.
Yeah, I was going to jump in when Sarah was saying, how do you bring the teacher voice to the table? And so much of our work is predicated on community consultation. So we work in 3 domains. We work strategically with schools and districts, which is where that notion of community consultation comes into place. Whether you're writing a new strategic plan, whether you have a new strategic initiative that you're trying to get up and off the ground, the starting point, especially if you kind of harken back to that notion of human-centered design that I talked about, that's an important skill or design thinking for students, that starts with the people that you're trying to enact the change with, right? So how do you speak to teachers, students? We do a lot of surveying and focus grouping and make sure that all those voices are at the table and then use those to define the initiatives. So strategic work is a place that we can help you. The second place is professional development, and we've given you various examples in this conversation about how we help, but what we believe in is sustained professional development that isn't one-hit wonders. We know that one-hit wonders never change the world, but we want teachers to be engaged in action research, where they're building something in a professional development session, trying it in their classroom, coming back and reflecting on it, and then really being able to double down on the things that work. And then the third place that we can support you is with direct to student programming. So we have pre-made experiences that we customize when we work with schools to actually model for you in the classroom how to help kids flex these skills in things like leadership and design thinking and entrepreneurial thinking. So there's a number of places where we can help. And usually the best way, again, is to get in touch. Sorry, I keep saying that. Let us know what initiatives you have on the go, and then we can work together to make something come to life. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks a million, Sandra. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Lindsay, and thanks to everyone on this call for being a part of our world here this afternoon. We really enjoyed the opportunity to connect with IDEA members. And do please, if you haven't filled out that diagnostic Google form, I see a number have come in, so you'll get those reports if you have filled it out. If not, do take a moment to do that. But in the meantime, I'll throw it back to Lindsay to share that link and say a few final words. So yeah, thanks again. Take it away, Lindsay.
Thank you all so much. So many wheels are turning now, and I feel like there's such a great partnership here between the Future of Ed and IDEA team members. I am putting that link to the PDH in the chat right now. do look for a follow-up email tomorrow with resources and links and contact information so you can get in touch with these phenomenal folks and learn how you can get started with your district and your school with that. What is it called? The Coalition of the Willing. I liked that. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to working with you all further. Have a great day, everybody.